The crack of shattering glass echoed through the cafeteria like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a tray hitting the floor. It was the sound of a carefully constructed invisibility breaking apart. One moment, Emma Chen was just another face in the crowd, the transfer student who spoke only when called upon. The next, she stood frozen in the center of a widening circle of students, chocolate milk soaking through her white blouse, the remnants of her lunch scattered at her feet, her hands trembling as they tried uselessly to wipe away the mess. And standing above her, phone in hand, capturing every humiliating second, was Derek Lawson, captain of the lacrosse team, his smile sharp as broken glass. He was already posting it, his thumbs dancing across the screen, adding the caption that would cement this moment into digital immortality. But he never got to hit send. Because everyone in that cafeteria, including Derek, felt the change before they understood it. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chaotic noise of 300 teenagers eating and laughing died like someone had cut the power. A presence had entered the room, something that made every primitive instinct in that space whisper a single word: danger. Derek looked up from his phone, the grin still plastered on his face, and found himself staring into the eyes of a woman whose stillness was more terrifying than any scream. A Marine Corps officer, and the story everyone thought they were witnessing, the easy, viral-ready destruction of a quiet girl, ended before it could begin. Subscribe to the final watch and join me as we enter a cafeteria where one calculated act of cruelty collided with a force no teenager could have anticipated. This is a story about hidden strength, the cost of cowardice, and the moment a hunter became the hunted. Emma Chen's childhood had been a study in adaptation. Her mother's military career meant that stability was measured in months, not years. Fort Bragg, Camp Pendleton, Quantico. Each base brought new schools, new hierarchies, new unspoken rules to decode. Emma learned early that the safest way to navigate these temporary worlds was to become a chameleon, present but unremarkable, friendly but never intimate. It was a survival skill that had served her through 13 relocations. This latest move to Riverside High in the sprawling suburbs of Virginia was supposed to be different. Her mother, Colonel Sarah Chen, had finally accepted a teaching position at the War College. No more deployments. No more sudden goodbyes. The moving boxes were unpacked with a sense of permanence that felt almost foreign. The furniture fit the rooms like it belonged. Emma's books lined the shelves in her bedroom, no longer packed in crates marked fragile. Riverside High, with its modern glass architecture and championship banners, was meant to be her final chapter. Emma approached it the way she approached everything new, with careful observation and strategic silence. She mapped the social terrain from a distance, identifying the power structures with the analytical eye her mother had trained into her. The ruling class was obvious. At the apex stood Derek Lawson, lacrosse captain, son of the mayor, possessor of the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never facing real consequences. His territory was the main cafeteria, and he presided over it like a king in his court, surrounded by athletes and admirers who laughed at his jokes before he even delivered the punchlines. Emma's strategy for the first month was elegantly simple. Blend in, stay peripheral, observe, and survive. She chose her lunch spot carefully, a table near the windows where the theater kids and art students congregated, people too absorbed in their own creative worlds to scrutinize newcomers. She dressed in neutral tones, spoke when spoken to, and moved through the hallways with practiced efficiency. For 4 weeks, it worked. She was a shadow, a name on the attendance sheet, a quiet presence in the back of the classroom. But in the predatory ecosystem of high school, careful invisibility can itself become a target. It suggests vulnerability. It invites testing. Derek's attention first fell on her in AP Literature, where she'd written an essay analyzing Lord of the Flies that Ms. Peterson had read aloud as an example, without naming the author. Derek, who'd submitted 3 paragraphs of plot summary, had glowered when he saw Emma's slight blush of recognition. The next day, someone had accidentally knocked her backpack off her desk, spilling her carefully organized notes across the floor. The apology was theatrical, the laughter behind it unmistakable. Emma had gathered her papers without a word, her face impassive, and returned to her seat. That silence, she would later understand, was interpreted not as dignity but as weakness. To someone like Derek Lawson, silence was permission. It was an invitation to escalate. The incident in the cafeteria was no accident. It was performance art, cruelty as entertainment. It was a Thursday, the cafeteria at maximum capacity, every table occupied, the noise level hovering just below chaos. Emma was carrying her tray, navigating the narrow space between tables, when she felt the deliberate collision. Not a bump, but a calculated impact. Her tray tilted, then fell, and as she tried to catch it, someone else, one of Derek's teammates, had swept her legs. She went down hard, the tray clattering to the floor, chocolate milk exploding across her chest and lap, her carefully packed lunch, the spring rolls her mother had made that morning, scattered and crushed. The cafeteria's roar dropped to scattered giggles and gasps. Emma looked up from the floor to see Derek standing over her, phone pointed down, filming, his face lit with that special joy that comes from public humiliation. "Whoa, new girl, you okay?" His voice was loud, performative concern masking pure malice. "Guess those kung fu reflexes don't work in the real world, huh?" The reference was to an offhand comment Emma had made weeks ago in gym class when asked about her hobbies. She'd mentioned martial arts training. The teacher had moved on, but Derek had apparently filed it away, waiting for the perfect moment to weaponize it. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Emma pushed herself up, her hands slipping slightly in the spilled milk. Her white blouse was ruined, the fabric clinging to her skin, transparent in places. Her face burned, but her eyes remained dry, fixed on the floor. She didn't look at Derek. She didn't look at anyone. That was her mistake. To Derek, her refusal to engage was gasoline on flames. He circled her slowly, phone still recording, narrating for his future audience. "Look at her, guys. Silent treatment. Very zen. Very mysterious." He zoomed in on the milk stain, on her trembling hands trying to salvage what couldn't be saved. "This is going straight to the highlight reel. New girl wipes out. Classic." Emma finally looked up at him. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Please delete that." The word "please" was a critical error. Derek's eyes lit up. "Please," he echoed, laughing. "Oh, she speaks. Did you guys hear that? She said please." He turned to his audience, arms spread wide. "She's begging, people. This is gold." He raised his phone higher, capturing the widest possible angle of Emma's humiliation, the ruined lunch, the soaked clothes, the stares of 300 students. He was in his element, untouchable, powerful. This moment would define his status for weeks. He opened his mouth to deliver the final mockery, the caption that would make this go viral beyond just the school. But the words died in his throat. The laughter around him stuttered and stopped. The cafeteria, which had been buzzing with cruel energy, went silent with a speed that was almost supernatural. It wasn't the silence of attention. It was the silence of prey animals sensing a predator. Derek lowered his phone slowly, confusion flickering across his features. Every student in the cafeteria was looking at something behind him, their faces registering various degrees of shock and fear. He turned, following their collective gaze. Standing at the cafeteria entrance, having just passed through the double doors that led to the administrative wing, was a woman who seemed to alter the very physics of the room. She wasn't exceptionally tall, perhaps 5'8", but she was built with a precision that suggested every muscle had a specific, lethal purpose. Her uniform was Marine's dress blues, the kind worn for ceremonies and formal occasions, ribbons and medals arranged in perfect rows across her chest. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. Her face was composed, weathered, marked with the kind of lines that come from squinting across deserts under hostile suns. But it was her eyes that silenced the world. They were locked onto the scene before her, onto Derek, onto the phone, onto Emma kneeling in spilled milk and crushed food. They were dark, calm, and held the weight of a judgment that had already been rendered. This was Colonel Sarah Chen, Emma's mother. She had come to the school for a scheduled meeting with the principal about the drought program she'd agreed to advise. She had just witnessed her daughter's destruction being filmed for entertainment. For a long, frozen moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The colonel didn't shout. She didn't rush forward. She simply began to walk. Her dress shoes clicked on the linoleum floor, each step measured, each step inevitable. The mass of students parted before her without anyone consciously deciding to move. They simply melted away, pressed back against tables and walls, creating a clear corridor. She walked with a purpose so absolute it seemed to bend reality around her. Students with phones in their hands forgot they were recording. Teachers who had been eating lunch in the faculty corner stood frozen, uncertain whether to intervene or observe. Her gaze never wavered from Derek Lawson. Derek, for his part, seemed to be experiencing a fundamental recalibration of his understanding of power. The phone slipped slightly in his suddenly sweaty grip. His lacrosse-honed posture, usually so confident, began to curl inward. His two teammates, who had been flanking him like loyal henchmen, took quiet steps backward, disappearing into the crowd, offering no allegiance, no protection. The colonel stopped directly in front of Derek. She was perhaps an inch shorter than him, but the disparity in presence made him seem childlike. She looked at him with an expression that was somehow worse than anger. It was disappointment, assessment, and dismissal all at once. Then she looked past him to her daughter. Emma was still on the floor, trying to gather the scattered remains of her lunch with shaking hands. When she saw her mother, something in her face cracked. Not into tears, not yet, but into a recognition that shifted her entire posture. The hunched defeat straightened slightly. The colonel's eyes traveled from her daughter's face to the soaked blouse, to the phone still in Derek's hand, back to Derek. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent cafeteria like a blade being drawn. "Hand me the phone." It wasn't a request. It was an order from a dimension of authority Derek had never encountered, not from teachers, not from coaches, not from his mayor father. His body moved before his mind could construct a defense. He extended the phone toward her, his hand visibly trembling. The colonel took it, looked at the screen, saw the video paused on a frame of Emma's humiliated face. Her jaw tightened fractionally. She held the phone up so Derek could see it clearly. "Watch," she said. Her thumb moved, and she deleted the video. Then she went to his photo gallery. He had apparently taken photos earlier in the sequence. She deleted those too. "Do you know what you just did?" she asked, her voice still that terrible, calm monotone. "You committed assault and battery. You filmed it. You intended to distribute that film without consent, which in this state constitutes harassment and potentially cyber exploitation of a minor." Derek's face had gone from red to white. It was just a joke, ma'am. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean," the colonel interrupted, "to face consequences. That's what you didn't mean. But intent and impact are different things." She held up the phone. "This is evidence of a crime. I'm confiscating it." "You can't, my dad." "Your father," the colonel said, her voice dropping even lower, somehow more dangerous, "is about to have a very difficult conversation with his son. And if he objects to any of this, he can discuss it with the police when they arrive." She looked past Derek to the frozen crowd of students. "Anyone else film this?" Silence. Then, slowly, 3 students near the back raised their hands, their faces pale. "Bring me your phones," the colonel ordered. They did, wordlessly. She checked each one, deleted the relevant footage, and handed them back. "Thank you for your cooperation." She turned back to Derek. "You're going to apologize." "Not to me. To her." She didn't point. Everyone knew who she meant. Derek turned to face Emma, who had gotten to her feet, still hugging herself, the sweater she'd tied around her waist now wrapped around her shoulders to cover the stained blouse. He swallowed hard, his throat working. "Emma, I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. The colonel's voice cut through again. "Louder. Mean it." Derek flinched like he'd been struck. "Emma, I'm sorry." His voice cracked, the veneer of cool completely shattered. "I was being an asshole, and I'm sorry." The colonel stared at him for a long moment, then gave a single, curt nod. She didn't say thank you or that's better. She simply turned her back on him, a dismissal so complete it reduced him to irrelevance. She walked to her daughter. She didn't embrace Emma in front of the crowd. She stood close, a wall between her daughter and the staring world, and quietly said, "Let's get you cleaned up." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Together, they walked out of the cafeteria, the colonel's hand resting firmly on Emma's back. Behind them, the silence held for another 3 heartbeats. Then the cafeteria exploded into whispers, exclamations, and frantic discussions. But the story didn't end in the cafeteria. That was only the detonation point. The shockwaves spread, reshaping everything they touched. In Principal Harrison's office 30 minutes later, the conversation began with practiced administrative deflection. "Colonel Chen, I want you to know we take bullying very seriously here at Riverside. Derek will face disciplinary action, of course. Detention, probably suspension from the team for a week or two. Colonel Chen, seated with Emma beside her, both of them now in dry clothes borrowed from the nurse's office, listened without expression. When the principal paused, she spoke. "Principal Harrison, my daughter was physically assaulted in a premeditated attack designed to cause maximum humiliation. The assault was filmed with intent to distribute. Under Virginia law, that constitutes assault and battery, harassment, and potentially cyber exploitation. You're talking to me about detention." Principal Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "Colonel, with respect, assault is a very strong word. This was teenage behavior that got out of hand. Derek is a good student from a prominent family. His family's prominence," the colonel interrupted, her voice remaining level, "is about to become a liability. You have two options, Principal Harrison. You can treat this as the crime it is, involve law enforcement, and let the legal system function as intended. Or you can attempt to minimize it, and I will contact every media outlet in the state, the Department of Education, and my contacts in Congress. I have spent 23 years serving this country. I will not spend 1 minute watching its institutions fail my daughter in the name of protecting a bully's future. Your choice." The meeting ended with a call to the county police. Within hours, the story had broken containment. It wasn't just school gossip. It was regional news. Decorated Marine's daughter assaulted at Riverside High, bullies video evidence confiscated. The few cell phone clips that had escaped deletion before the colonel's intervention spread across social media. The footage was grainy but damning: the fall, the filming, Derek's mocking narration, and then the sudden, silent arrival of the Marine officer. The public reaction was swift and divided. Some local voices, particularly those tied to the Lawson family, argued that Derek was being made an example of, that teenage mistakes shouldn't ruin futures, that the military parent had overreacted and intimidated a minor. But far more voices, especially as details emerged, saw the incident for what it was: calculated cruelty captured on video by a perpetrator too arrogant to imagine consequences. Derek's family, influential and well-connected, hired an expensive legal team. They painted Derek as a victim of circumstance, claimed Emma had isolated herself and invited suspicion, suggested the Chen family was seeking attention and compensation. It was in the preliminary hearing at the county juvenile court that the narrative underwent its final, decisive shift. Derek's attorney, a silver-haired man in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, was building a case around Emma's supposed fragility. He positioned her as an unstable newcomer, perhaps exaggerating the incident, leveraging her mother's rank to bully his client. He turned to Emma, seated at the witness table, and delivered what he thought was the killing question. "Miss Chen, isn't it true that you have a history of avoiding social interaction? That you deliberately isolated yourself, creating an environment of suspicion and misunderstanding?" Before Emma could answer, the Chen family's attorney, a sharp woman from a Richmond firm specializing in civil rights cases, stood. "Objection. The witness's social behavior is not material to whether an assault occurred." The judge, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, overruled. "The witness may answer." Derek's lawyer smirked, sensing victory. "Let me rephrase for clarity. Miss Chen, would you describe yourself as physically capable of defending yourself? Or are you, as your silence and behavior suggest, helpless?" Emma, who had been answering questions in soft but steady tones, went very still. She looked at her mother, seated in the gallery. Colonel Chen gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Emma looked back at the lawyer. "No, sir," she said clearly. "I am not helpless." The lawyer's smirk widened. "Really? You're telling this court that you, a 110-pound transfer student, could have defended yourself against a 6-foot athlete?" "Yes, sir. I could have." The lawyer actually laughed. "And how, Miss Chen, would you have accomplished that?" Emma took a slow breath. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It carried an edge, a confidence that made the entire courtroom lean forward. "My mother didn't just serve in the Marine Corps, sir. She prepared her family. Since I was 11 years old, she has trained me in Krav Maga and Marine Corps martial arts program. Level 2 brown belt." She paused, letting that sink in. "I know how to break the hold Derek used. I know the exact pressure points on the wrist and elbow that would have made him release me in under 2 seconds. I know how to disable an attacker of any size by targeting the throat, eyes, and joints. I know that the element of surprise is the greatest equalizer when someone underestimates you. The courtroom was utterly silent. Derek's lawyer had frozen, his mouth slightly open. Derek himself, at the defense table, looked like he might be sick. Emma continued, her gaze steady and fierce. The reason I didn't use any of those techniques on Derek Lawson wasn't because I couldn't. It was because my mother also taught me about proportionality, about restraint, about choosing when to fight and when to endure. In that cafeteria, I chose not to escalate to violence. Derek chose to attack someone he thought was vulnerable. There's a difference. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on the lawyer. But since you've questioned my capability, I should note that in last year's regional Krav Maga youth tournament in North Carolina, I placed second in my weight division. I can provide documentation if needed. And if you'd like a practical demonstration of what I could have done to your client, I'd be happy to arrange one. Derek and I appear to be in the same weight class. The statement landed like a grenade. The few journalists in the courtroom gallery frantically typed notes. The judge coughed to hide what might have been a smile. Derek's lawyer sat down heavily, his strategy in ruins. The video of Emma's testimony was uploaded by a court reporter within an hour and went explosively viral. Within 24 hours, it had millions of views across multiple platforms. The narrative flipped entirely. Emma Chen was no longer the meek victim. She was a warrior who had chosen mercy. Her restraint wasn't weakness, it was the most powerful form of strength. The public sympathy that had been divided now consolidated overwhelmingly around the Chen family. Op-eds praised Emma's composure. Think pieces analyzed the implications of her testimony for understanding power dynamics among teenagers. The consequences for Derek were comprehensive. He was charged with assault and harassment. He was expelled from Riverside High. The lacrosse scholarship offers from 3 universities were quietly withdrawn. His father, facing intense scrutiny, resigned from his position on the city council. The family, unable to weather the social storm, relocated to another state within 2 months. Riverside High, under media spotlight and district oversight, implemented sweeping changes, zero-tolerance anti-bullying protocols, mandatory bystander intervention training, and a revamped reporting system. But the most meaningful changes happened on a smaller, more personal scale. Emma Chen did not return to invisibility. She walked the halls of Riverside with a new presence, not aggressive but unmistakably self-assured. The borrowed military bearing from her mother now fit her like her own skin. Students who had been silent spectators before began to approach her. The other quiet ones, the art students, the band kids, the theater crew, the academic grinders who had also learned to navigate by staying peripheral, found courage in her example. She started an after-school self-defense club. The first session, held in the wrestling room with her mother as volunteer instructor, had 67 students show up. Mostly girls, but not exclusively. They came to learn what Emma had learned, that power doesn't always shout, that preparation is its own form of confidence. On a cool October afternoon, Colonel Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the wrestling mats, watching her daughter demonstrate a wrist release to a circle of freshmen. Emma was speaking clearly, patiently correcting grips and stances. The girl who had spent years folding herself into corners was now confidently occupying center space. Principal Harrison approached quietly, standing beside the colonel. "She's remarkable," he said, his voice subdued. "I want to apologize again, Colonel Chen. I was thinking about optics, about protecting the school's reputation. I wasn't thinking about protecting your daughter." Colonel Chen didn't look at him immediately. She watched Emma complete the demonstration, watched the students practice, watched confidence being built one technique at a time. Finally, she turned to the principal. "The world is full of people who forget about the individuals when institutions are at stake, Principal Harrison. The measure of a good leader is recognizing that mistake and correcting it." She walked onto the mats, joining the circle, offering corrections with the same focused attention she'd once used to train Marines in combat zones. The room was filled with the sounds of effort, of learning, of young people discovering their own capacity for strength. The tear in Emma Chen's world had been mended, not by pretending it never happened, but by weaving something stronger through the damaged places. A pattern of resilience, of quiet power, and of a bond between mother and daughter that no bully, no courtroom, no viral video could diminish. That Thursday in the cafeteria had not broken Emma. It had simply revealed what was already there, forged through years of adaptation and training, waiting for the moment it was needed. True strength, as it turned out, wasn't about the absence of fear or pain. It was about the choice made in the presence of both. Emma Chen had chosen restraint when she could have chosen violence. She had chosen truth when she could have chosen silence. And in doing so, she had taught an entire school that the quiet ones, the ones who seem vulnerable, might be carrying a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. What resonates with you in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in stories that reveal hidden strength and the quiet courage that changes everything, subscribe to The Final Watch. Let's keep exploring the moments that define us.